chilly gust of wind swayed tree branches, causing them to dance and tap rhythmically on my window. I had a long history of health complications, but somehow I'd survived. At 27 years old, I had outlived almost everyone I knew. The virus didn't affect me for some unknown reason. But now, I'd developed a severe case of pneumonia. Things weren't looking good. The virus that wiped out everyone I loved hadn't taken me. But by the looks of it, an untreated, complicated common cold was going to do just that. The irony was not lost on me. The cold breeze that caused this illness continued to mock me with its eerie tapping on my window. I'd been holed up in this motel room for almost 2 weeks now, though it seemed like a lifetime. Any survivors were bunkered in their homes, afraid of exposure, seeking to protect the few that remained. I, on the other hand, had nobody. My breathing was heavy and laboured, each breath producing a rattle deep inside my chest, like an abandoned spray paint can. My room was small, dusty, and lit dimly. The room's only source of light was a dirty window. Not much sunlight made it through the overcast skies. A thin layer of dust collected on the surface of the only piece of furniture in the room, an old wooden table that wobbled upon the smallest nudge. The leather cover of the King James Bible that sat on its surface was hard and cracked. It had not been opened in years, now served as a decorative piece. Staring at the wall, I rode a deep hallucinatory trance brought on by my severe fever. The shapes of chipped paint on the wall swayed with the rhythm created by the trees' branches tapping. My bed seemed to be rocking, as if floating through light ocean waves. A blast of hot air hit me. The heater rumbled to life and disrupted my seafaring fantasy. I wished it would turn off. I wished I could get up, open the window, turn off the heater, and let in revitalizing air. I wished I was capable of taking a deep breath without pain. I wished that I could eat a fresh meal. I wished I could kiss my parents and say I love you to my wife, hug my brothers before they were ripped away. But I couldn't. I couldn't do any of those things. Grief filled me. Bedridden and clinging to life, I closed my eyes and drifted away, further into the hallucination. It was mostly dark when I woke. A minuscule amount of streetlight peeped through the window, just enough to cast shadows and silhouettes through the room. I looked around the room, trying to anchor myself out of my fever-induced dreams. I noticed that I was not alone. He was there. He stood directly in front of me, back against the wall. I stared and focused, trying to determine if this was another deceiving manifestation of my fever.
Ah, you're awake.
He hissed.
I find this works best when you're awake for it.
He took a step forward into the light. He was a tall, slim man, wearing a tuxedo, black bow tie, and black Homburg hat that casted shadow over his face. He looked up at me, and he smiled, exposing a row of yellow shark-like teeth. His lips, they were blood red, and the only source of colour in the room. His eyes were sunken in deeper than any man I've ever seen. His skin was pale, with just a tint of green. But his most disconcerting feature were his arms. Two long, straw-like limbs extended from his shoulders, dropping close to his ankles.
You ready?
He said, in a hoarse, raspy voice. I laid paralyzed. The walls continued to spin. I tried to protest, but my mouth gaped open inaudibly. My body was tense and immobile, my eyes locked with his.
Are you ready?
He repeated, with a tone of impatience. He moved forward, bumping into the end of my bed, causing it to jerk back. His back began to bend forward, and his right arm came up, showing his inhuman thin arms and claw-like nails that were as yellow and sharp as his teeth.
Why are you here?
Said a soft voice off to the right of the room. The man in the tuxedo pulled back, slightly startled. He slowly unarched his back to an upright position, and he turned. It took every effort I had to turn my neck to see who spoke. The room spun. My head was on fire, but my head pivoted to the side. There stood my mother. But it wasn't my mother as I last saw her, taking her last breath, pale and malnourished. I was sure it was her. I would never forget that voice. But she couldn't be more than 28 years old, the age she was when she married. Next to her stood a man I didn't recognize at first, hand pressed upon the small of her back. But as I connected the dots, it became clear to me it was my father. His face was young and full of life. Life had not yet taken its toll as I last saw him. His eyes were full of youth. And there they were, side by side once again. My mother flashed a smirk in my direction. My father leaned over and turned off the heater. "Come on, it's not his time," said another deeper voice. I didn't have to turn. I could recognize that voice anywhere. It was my Uncle Dylan's voice. "Weren't we enough?" said a fourth voice, one I didn't recognize, coming from the direction of the door. I reverted back to my original position, and through my peripherals, I saw a woman I only knew through photographs. My grandma, Lou, sat by the table, with strikingly similar disposition to her son and daughter in the room. Her right hand nudged the table, causing it to wobble back and forth. Her other hand laid over the Bible. The man in the tuxedo smirked. His red lips shone above his razor teeth. He faced me and he repeated,
"Are you ready?"
My dad, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward from his leaning position and looked at the man. "We had a deal. Why are you here?" He pleaded in that cool voice that only my father had.
"It was him or us,"
said my mother, softly but firmly. "Why are you here?" they all said, without coordination, in offbeats. The man in the tuxedo's smirk turned into a chuckle. The room filled with a putrid stench as his breath made its way around the room.
"Didn't you all ever hear?
He cackled.
Never make a deal with the devil."
Once again, his back arched over me. The smell of rotting flesh overcame me as his face drew closer to mine. I closed my eyes. His skeleton hand neared me.
"You know why I'm here."
I closed my eyes in anticipation. His hand touched me. Cold. A fiery cold overcame my body. So very cold. It struck me to my core. It diminished all other ailments by comparison. His finger touched my forehead, but I felt the cold it produced beyond my toes. There was nothing but cold. Silence filled the room. Only the tapping of the tree branch remained outside the window.